Igor, welcome. You are my next victim out of the 100 engineers in Arista that we asked very nicely. Would you guys test the expert program for us and run through the 6 and the 7 kind of back to back? So congratulations is the first thing I'll say for going through that and passing them both and being one of
Appreciate
our
that.
first, kind of L7s that are sitting out in the world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you start? How long you been in the industry? Did you do something before this and just got into engineering? Whatever that story is.
Yeah, sure, Terry. So my interest in all of this electronics and communication stuff started right after high school. I went into the Air Force and I did SATCOM communications in the Air Force. And after coming out of the Air Force, I pursued a bachelor's degree in computer science, finished that. And afterwards, I faced kind of a fork in the road. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to do software engineering, or do I want to do something else? And I was always, interested and always leaning towards that communication, that networking part of it. And so I decided to join that world. I got my CCNA first, CCNP in route switch, and I started working in the customer space, both deploying and operating enterprise networks. Did that for a number of years, and then went from the customer space, joined a reseller, and started working with customers and helping them deploy networks and spec out and design networks. And that's when I thought the next thing to do would be, work on my CCIE. I had my CCNA and CCNP for a while now, and I thought it was time. I took the challenge, and spent probably a year or more prepping for it and studying and taking the written, and then traveling down to South Carolina and uh, taking the lab exam there. And that's as folks that done it, it's kind of like a life-changing experience when you get to do something like that. There was a huge accomplishment at the end of it. It was a lot of work. And from there on, I really, decided that this is going to be my career. I kind of probably decided before that, and just kept on going with that.
So when you did that one, what all did you do in the Air Force? You said, talk that through a little bit.
Yeah, I did. So I did satellite communications. So we would deploy in the field, along with the radar operators, the air traffic controllers, and we were their communication hub where everyone would plug in all their phones, all their radar equipment to communicate from out in the field, back to other fields and headquarters or wherever it needed to go. So we were their network, right? So we were working, SATCOM, our uh, things like T1 speeds. We took T1 circuits into our uh, equipment and shot them up to the satellites and made them go
Yeah,
places.
I was a JTAC while I was in, or a TAC P guy. So
Oh,
that's what I did
okay, nice.
while I was in. So I had satellite stuff, but I had to carry it on my back. You know.
Yep, you're your operator and
Yep,
everything.
yep.
Yeah, you had to set it
I had
all
to
up.
be able to troubleshoot it and remember setting up HF antennas, and out of spoons and rocks and sticks and figuring out how to do that out there if we were in like emergency situations and stuff like this. And I remember I was stationed in Germany. We're out in on an exercise in the middle of nowhere, and I'm in the back of a tank, and I got our HF antenna, and it was Super Bowl, so we were out on exercise, so we couldn't watch the Super Bowl. But
Can watch it.
I did order pizza from the PX then because we were on Army post. We got pizza
Yep,
ordered and picked it up, and then bought a radio at the same time so we could actually dial it in. But I did the call for the pizza through the HF. I would do a phone patch.
through
Yep,
the HR.
fun days back then.
That's awesome.
So how
Yeah,
did you
for
connect
sure.
into Arista?
Yeah, so after that, I spent some more time working at vendors, or different partners and resellers. And one of the managers at Arista reached out to me. We've met actually at a VMUG years back. We linked in, connected up, and we haven't really talked since that. And then one day he just reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I have this opportunity." He described it. At the time, I've heard of Arista, but didn't know too much about it. Afterwards, I did some of my homework, researched it, and after that, I was like, this is the place to go. And I made that decision then. Unfortunately, this was right before COVID hit. So everything was put on hold. So I had to wait a year after getting interviewed before being able to join
Oh,
Arista,
wow.
but it was well worth it.
So when did you actually
Yep.
join? What was the date you joined?
It was, let's see, so it was in June of 21,
Oh, wow.
is what, yeah,
So you're
when I
getting close
joined.
to 2 year mark, or a little over 2 year mark now.
Yeah, a little over
Yeah,
2 years.
nice.
Yep,
So starting to get settled in, and you figure
absolutely.
out that,
Yeah.
oh, memorizing products here is easy. You know, we only have a few. They start with a 7. Right?
That is for sure a challenge. When I first started here, it was a little overwhelming. Like, that was one of the big things. Like, all right, I got this technology thing. I know how, BGP works. I know how OSPF works, spanning tree. But man, how am I going to remember all of these, product numbers and what chipsets they have and what capabilities? But it does take a little bit of time. You break them down like any other problem. You break it down into smaller pieces, and it comes together.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, but
So what exactly is your job at Arista? And have you done the same thing since you started, or is it evolved into one thing into another? And also go ahead and mention whatever your at Arista we love to have like 26 jobs, only one of which we get paid for. That's our job that we got hired for, but then we do all the other stuff. So what all are you involved in?
yep. Yep. So I got hired as a systems engineer. I'm still a systems engineer. My title changed a little bit. It's now technical lead, part of the data center working group, uh, working on uh, providing documentation and sharing that knowledge with other members about the data center technologies and things like the new upcoming things around AI technologies that are coming into the network that we really need to skill up on. I also help run the Connecticut Network Users Group. I'm the group leader here, and we meet quarterly in Connecticut. We do have a pretty good following that comes out. A group of engineers, from all kinds of different vendors, whether they're from customer or vendor or reseller. Uh, it's a vendor neutral space, so we don't really, it's not something that we compete about. We're just there to get together, have beers, share experiences, learn from one another. So it's a really good time.
Yes. It's kind of neat. There's 2 points I want to hit on what you said. One, the user groups are great because, um, just like with this certification, and now you've kind of gone all the way through it. Of course, we call it Arista, ACE level 6 and ACE level 7. That's our branding. But reality, the skills that you're learning and the skills that you're proving in the evaluations, um, are not held to Arista because everything we do is open. I mean, that does make learning the switches a little more difficult because you got to memorize the chips and all these kind of things and what we're doing. But, at the end of the day, EVPN or data center designs, things like this, most of this is just strictly open. So, if you run up through this level, you're getting skills that are transferable anywhere. And I think those user groups are really cool ways to kind of go, well, we could talk about EVPN and we're not being vendor specific. It's actually EVPN is EVPN, and you're going to deal with it in a lot of
Yep.
different ways. And it makes it really interesting kind of dynamic for us, I think. And certainly one from, the training and the certification point of view is it made me have to look at things a little different than the guys that originally sat down to carve out like what CCIE was and JNCIE. Most of those had in common. Most of the vendors, Microsoft did the same thing. VMware did the same thing. You're getting certified on their specific proprietary things they do. I looked at it when I came in here and said, well, that's kind of the easy route and I can't take it because we don't really have hardly anything that's proprietary. I mean, even if I say CloudVision, that's our, kind of flagship platform. It's really not a whole lot of proprietary underneath that too. There's a lot of open, aspects of that as well. So I'm like, all right, well, what am I actually creating a certification around? And, what I settled in was, I'm creating a certification around what network engineers should look like, not specifically what
Yep.
Arista network engineers should look like. It's funny the two things line up together, but they're also very, very separate. Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, if you can do this, you can go do it in a mixed environment. EVPN is EVPN, BGP
Yeah.
is BGP.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, also, part of the level 7 is the automation piece,
Yep.
right? And the things that you have to have skills there and that you learn to be able to pass that test are skills that will apply to
Yep.
anything, right? We're talking about Ansible, we're talking about Python, just general developer skills that the network engineers of this day just need to have a handle on. They don't have to be experts on it, but they need to know how to use them
Right.
to do their
Right.
job, right?
And I tell people that all the time too. It's Ansible again. It's just like I said. It's open. Exactly to your point. It's wide open. Now, are we going to teach you enough Ansible to go design applications? Enough Python to get? And no, we're not approaching it that way. We still have a use case for it. It's how do we do network as code type thing? These are the areas that we're going to focus in. But I think the work group thing too. I want to put a plug in for that because a lot of people now don't realize that we do this. And yes, we have people in the product teams and they're researching the products and they communicate out to the SE teams and you guys are in the field talking to the customers. But I love how we volunteer for so much additional work. It's encouraged. We we promote it within, I guess would be the right word. It's a good thing to do for all of you guys. But it's a really cool way to make sure that we're getting that voice of the customer back into, our overall architectures. It might not be something that's necessarily, of course, some of this stuff can leak back as feature requests and stuff like that to the product teams, but sometimes it's just, how are we positioning EVPN? How are we positioning BGP? Are we hitting the mark? Are we getting the customer story right? Are we answering the right problems the right way? And I love that we do that. Yes, I've left some other vendors where there's more documentation than you can get your hands on, and it's not like that necessarily here. Documentation is very, very light sometimes, but the engineers and how well we talk to each other and how well we communicate and the things that we're doing in work groups. If you want to talk to smart people and hear smart answers about solutions, then this is something you're going to find here that I haven't found necessarily everywhere else. So it's kind of a neat thing. Talk to me a little bit about, if you can remember back to how you prep for CCIE and then what you've gone through here. We obviously are trying to do some things a little different. I'm a big proponent of I'm not going to be a Me Too offering. I'm not just simply going to copy somebody else's and then go shout from the world that I'm different. We actually did do a very different thing. I think we were at a point in the market where my opinion of the other expert programs they're very good programs. The companies that have them are very large. It's going to be very hard to change those programs anymore. And they're kind of locked into what they started with, and now they just keep going with it. And I don't blame them for it. It's good. I think the program is great. I think it was better a long time ago than it is today. I think it's starting to lose some of its relevancy. And that's not to take away from anybody that's pressing and learning it. I mean, you're going to learn stuff no matter what if you try to go through this. My question is, what are you learning? Are you learning things that are best practice? Are you learning things that are going to help you Monday after you pass to go help a customer move around? So give me a little bit on that. How do we do? I know we're different. A lot of people are going to say we're ridiculous in some ways, having to do 3 8-hour windows for L7, but we have some logic behind that. We're actually trying to take care of people while we're doing it. So start with where did you have to travel to go take L7? Start with that.
Oh, yeah, I traveled into my office at home
Right.
to take the L7. So that was a lot easier than having to travel somewhere. And of course, and that adds stress, having to travel somewhere else, rent a car, get there on time, early in the morning, all adds to the stress. Thinking about the experience, preparing back in the day for the IE, labbing, which is all great, right? And you do that for both places, right? You want to lab, you want to know exactly how to do stuff, and that's where you do a lot of the learning. But if you ask me, hey, Igor, what was on your test that you remember back in the IE? And honestly, what I remember are the trick questions that they tried to get you with, that I had to no usefulness, absolutely zero usefulness in real world, but it sticks out because I remember exactly how they tried to get you, right. How do you do this one specific thing on the CLI and completely useless. They say, supposedly it's open book, right? The IE lab, but they provide you, with a 900-page PDF that you get to scroll through during the lab, and it's not great.
Well, not to
The
date myself, but when I took it way back when, the entire website fit on the CD, so you were able to access the CD. Now, and you know,
I heard about that.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no. That's good. Yeah. It's not real world. It is what it real comes down to. When you're in the real world, you're operating or designing or standing up a network. You don't just have a CD or a PDF at your for your tools, right? You have everything for your tools. It's just knowing how to use those tools, knowing where to go, how to find the information. But at the same time, you can't. You're not just going to use an open book test to pass because you have the open answers. You really need to know the theory behind it. You may have to look at something just to figure out what the right syntax is for something. But that's a big difference in the L7, I'd say, is having all of these tools at your disposal to be able to pass the test.
Yeah, and and that was something we kind of we did really on purpose, because the way I looked at this is, listen, we're at a time in an age in networking now where the main topic right now in data center is, BGP and EVPN and VXLAN and overlay and underlay and, control plane and data plane. I just, in that little 20-second little thing, I just called off the top hardest technologies in the industry. I mean, things that I knew people spent 20 years on each individually to create a career around. BGP is not a small protocol. EVPN being, essentially just part of BGP is a very confusing thing, especially since it was designed to do something different than what we're doing with it today, and so really bending your brain. It's always fun for me to see new guys come in. I get a lot of really senior instructors come in. They've been doing BGP for decades. And I'm like, yeah, we do eBGP on the underlay. That's it. How do you do that? How do you do that without another routing protocol? That's not the way I learned BGP works. Yeah. Well, we're not using BGP the way that BGP was necessarily designed. It's a tool in the toolbox. We figured out a way to do it. This is scalable. It's easy. I mean, well, easy is relative, but the configuration is actually not complicated. It's understanding it that's very difficult, because you got a lot of layers going on here. You spent half of your career going layer 2, layer 3. And then I say, okay, well, go troubleshoot your MAC table in BGP. And yes, that makes people's eyes roll back in their head. So if I can't write an exam using those topics, allow you to come in during that exam window, pull out a bookmark, on a web page, pull out a design guide that you might have found in Arista that you love. Maybe you even got some sample config sitting on your desktop. If I can't figure out a way to design an exam using those topics and it still be extremely difficult, I don't really know those protocols. And so it is open book. It is a resource. It is at home, because we don't think unnecessary stress would be there. The way that we approached it was real world. Is I wouldn't go do a change window on the companies that I've worked with, which all the vendors out here call these their top 25 customers. This is where I spent my career. And never during that time would I went out and launched in a complete migration of a data center space and want you to do that from a hotel room, potentially even in another country, have jet lag, do all that stuff. And then you got to do this strictly off of memory. There's no way I would ever do that. That's just dumb. So my question for us was, why should we test like that? Is that realistic to test like that? Can I give these hiring managers, a nod and a wink and say, the guy might be crazy. I don't know. I'm not telling you I'd let him watch my kids or my dog, but EVPN and BGP, if he made it through this exam, he's your guy. Put him in the front. He knows what he's doing. He couldn't have got through it if he didn't. And, that's kind of what our goal was, is to make this less stressful, but also more realistic at the same time. Doesn't mean it's easy. Just hopefully it's realistic is what we were shooting for. So did we do pretty good with that?
That's and I think that's what it is. It is realistic, right? It's what the companies that are going to be deploying these networks, that's what they're going to want, right? Everybody's deploying a data center with EVPN. These are the skills that, if you are demonstrating these skills at the L7 to be able to deploy that, you'll be able to do it in today's networks.
Yep.
So, for sure.
Well, I know you've got some stuff coming up, so I'm going to do one last question before you jump off. Is anybody watching this going, all right, Igor seems like pretty laid back kind of guy. I think his career is pretty similar to mine. I'm going to give it a shot. Any warnings, any suggestions on study stuff? Don't go give away the goodies, but any nugget you want to pass along?
Yeah, Terry, honestly, I think the L3, L4, and the L5 prepare you really well to do the L7 and the L6, right? Those are kind of like, if you do those three and you got them, I think you'll have no trouble taking the challenge of doing the L6 and the L7, and it'll be well worth it.
I will echo that, because if people are watching this and going, well, what do I study? There's nothing on these exams that are not covered in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Quite a bit of it, obviously, these being expert topics, are covered in 3, 4, and 5. So you're 100% right. If you can't get through the lab guides in those courses, and you don't know that code, and you can't rip apart those configs, you're not going to pass L7, plain and simple. So and nothing other than that is actually needed. Of course, we got lots of things that you can download from design guides, stuff like this, that might make it easier to remember. But at the end of the day, everything you need to know is in those courses. So I appreciate that plug, because that is realistic, and I definitely want people to hear that. So, well, Igor, short and sweet, awesome. But a great conversation. And listen, man, just like I started, I'll end it with congratulations. Quite a feat.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.